Started realizing that something was up with my physical health when I was about 10. When I was 15, I started having panic attacks. So I started creating content too young.
When I first started, I was all around, I wanted to be a disabled fitness YouTuber. Yeah, there are a lot of people with very strong opinions, and you sit there going, it's not that deep.
So that is a place where you suddenly get very out of your echo chamber. I found it a really liberating but difficult process, and I'm a big nuance lover. What have I done here? Like, what have I just put on the internet that loads of people have seen? That
This has been great, but I'm now losing the will. Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Charli with us. Charli, just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself.
and I'm Charli. My pronouns are they them. I do a little bit of everything. I write, I speak, I create content. I'm also the author of All Tangled Up in Autism and Chronic Illness.
Nicely summed up, and also I love so many different things. Very similar to me. Of I think I'd be bored if I only did one thing.
Absolutely.
But tell us a bit more about you and how you ended up where you are today. I always like to get people's backstories to understand what has led them to where they are today.
I don't. So I suppose for me, it kind of starts fairly young. We started realizing that something was up with my physical health when I was about 10, and I was just being pushed around pillar to post from doctor to doctor, different departments. Everyone was saying, "This is not my problem. I don't know what this is," sort of thing. And now it's like, this is so crystal clear, but okay. And then when I was 15, I started having panic attacks, and that led me into them finally kind of going, "This is autism." And I ended up on a psychiatric unit, and that's where I received my diagnosis. And then in the kind of 10 years since then, I've picked up my kind of other diagnoses, as a lot of autistic chronically ill folks do. Like, you realize that actually there's 5, 6, 7 different things kind of going on. And so I started creating content too young. I was a blogger from the age of like 11, and then
Wow.
I know. My mom did not know.
Whoa.
And then started kind of content creating on like Tumblr quite young. That's where I learned about my queer identity. And then Instagram, I was like a chronically ill Instagrammer for a while at like 18, and that kind of all has become what it is now, I think, because I was, writing from such a young age, and trying to like make photos that were pleasing, and like writing little bits and longer things, and it's kind of all woven its way into being this kind of very full circle thing that I do now, I guess.
I hear that though, because I think as well, oftentimes as creatives, you kind of start off with like, oh, this is going to be my niche. This is what I'm going to focus on, and this is what I'm going to do. And then it spirals into loads of different things. Like when I first started, I was all around, I wanted to be a disabled fitness YouTuber. So that was where my whole world started. And then you sit there and look at where I'm at now and go, hang on, how did he end up from here all the way over here? But then I think as well, as you start creating and particularly as you start sort of getting involved in the space, you start seeing different things that you want to get involved in and want to speak on. So then you end up getting involved in so many different things and becoming this kind of cluster of all different things.
Yeah, and I think like I've been saying to a few people recently who have asked for advice around content, and they're saying, "I don't have a niche." And I'm like, "You are the niche. Like, you as a person can do and say whatever you want, and because it's you at the core of it, it's still all related. You don't have to have a separate social media page to talk about your different things if you don't want to. Like, you can do that, sure, but equally, you don't have to be like, we're 3D people. Like, you don't have to just be your disability or only talk about books or whatever it is. And I think that's really important to me.
Do you think that people get too worried about obviously whenever you start getting involved in the social media space, the question of the algorithm comes up, and you're basically gamifying everything based on the algorithm, or that's the theory. Do you think that whole thing of people going, oh, I really need a niche and I really need to drill down into like this specific thing is driven by the fact of people go, oh, I need to play to what the algorithm says.
Probably, but I also think that now the algorithm is such as it is that I don't even think that necessarily means anything, especially for those of us who are marginalized. Our content's getting suppressed anyway, right? So like, why not just make what you want to make? And the people that want to follow you and stay with you through your journey of all these different places, they'll stay. And if they don't want that, then they'll go somewhere else. And maybe they're not your people anyway. I think is my perspective. I'm sure, like, in terms of making money and like having hundreds of thousands of followers, that's not the advice. But for me, that's never been the priority. Like, my priority's always been community. And I think that for me, I want a community of people who love lots of different things and are really into lots of different forms of arts and culture and are multiply marginalized. And so for me, it's kind of like well, why bother trying to feed this robot when I can just be like so human?
I think as well, like your audience grows with you. So, like for example, the audience I have now isn't the same as what I had when I was starting out because at that time I was seven. Can't even remember how old I was when I started. 17, 18, much older than you. Um, uh, but that they would have been following me for completely different reasons as opposed to what my current followers are following me for. So then your audience grows with you and changes and evolves with you, and that's kind of my viewpoint on it. Of like you say, it's like creating for you because I think a lot of the time you can end up creating for the sake of someone else.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same account that I had at 18 when I was like a chronic illness influencer style kind of that's what I was aiming for. And you know what I found in the end was that that was making me more unwell because everyone kind of just we were kind of there for validation. We were teenagers who weren't being validated by the medical system. So we were searching for that validation elsewhere and it became competitive. It made me want to be more unwell. And in the end, I was like, I can't do it like this. Like, I still want to create, I still want to be here, but I don't want to do it like that. And so, well, I'm like 24 now, and it's the same account, but you wouldn't know that. Like, I've been through so many phases. At the peak of lockdown, I started making the very like Canva template infographics, which like no shade, like I love Canva to this day, but I was using it in a very drag and drop kind of way at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like everyone discovered Canva in March 2020, right? Like that's just what happened.
That and also it was I think everyone proper jumped on trends during COVID.
Mm.
Like everyone was like full on nothing else to do, so fuck it. This weird dance is about. This thing is about.
My really early reels and TikToks like makes me want to cry a little bit. Like sometimes they'll pop up in like the on this day kind of format, and I'm like, I don't want to see.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't want to
yeah,
see. Stop
yeah.
showing me.
Do you remember? Do you remember like the super? I say it was super early phases of TikTok. I was quite late to TikTok, but do you remember the super early phases of TikTok where the views were just strange? Like you'd post the most random video and suddenly it would get loads of views, and it was really weird because you're like, this is not how all the other platforms work.
No,
It was
yeah.
weird.
It was really strange. Me and my friend did quite a lot of TikToks in so it's my first year of uni that TikTok I was quite an early adopter, I think. So it's like pre-pandemic, but like not by much. And yeah, we just make like silly things at uni and sometimes they just have thousands of views and it's like, what have I done here? Like
Yep.
what have I
Yep.
just put on the internet that loads
Yep.
of people have seen that I thought was just gonna go to our five friends? Like very strange experience. I feel like now it's gone the other way and I just never get views on anything, but here
Yep.
we are.
I hear that. I hear that so much. Yep. It's honestly the algorithm's such a strange thing. But just lastly, on the social media side of things, one thing I often bring up is my concern being involved in the disability community online is it almost. This is a fairly new opinion of mine, but it almost feels like a echo chamber. Almost like we all know what changes need to happen, but we're just shouting. Like there's an element of like we're all shouting at each other, and it's like the way I like visualize it is obviously being physically disabled with cerebral palsy. I visualize it with two guys in wheelchairs shouting at each other. We need more ramps, and we're both shouting at each other. Yeah, we know. I'm trying to do that. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think?
It's an interesting one. I've had this debate a lot because I did a politics degree. So that is a place where you suddenly get very out of your echo chamber. Before I went to uni, I was in political spaces, I was only online. And then I went to uni and realized that seminars, brutal. And my first term of my politics degree was the 2019 general election. So you're trying to make friends and everyone's just fighting basically. So it wasn't the most ideal, but I think politically echo chambers are very real, and something I think about in terms of like community, I don't necessarily see it quite the same way, because I think it's very difficult. I've really struggled to work out, who am I making this for? Like, do I focus on content that is for other disabled people, or do I want to focus on content that is for non-disabled people to educate them? And I don't think I've ever quite decided where I sit. And I think it's a bit of an issue, because it's kind of, you are right, like it is this thing of like, we all know what's happening, and other people don't. So it's like, well, do you just not go there? Like, do
Yeah,
you just focus on each other and helping each other, or do you still kind of go, no, we have to push these
outside.
walls and push
Yeah,
everything else? And I think it's really fascinating, but I don't necessarily see it as so much as an echo chamber as I do like solidarity done badly almost.
yeah, and you've hit a really strong point as well. That whole thing of like, do you create and help the wider community that don't know about this disability, or do you try and create that support from within the community? And I think that's always been a weird line that I've always tried to skirt, because my belief system is very much like, ask a million questions, ask the really stupid ones, because my belief is the more I can educate you with those stupid questions and the more I make you feel comfortable, the more you're going to learn, rather than me going, no, I'm not having that conversation with you. Despite the fact, like, I agree with the fact of like, you can't do it with everyone, but my belief system is very much like, if you want to ask the silly questions, I'd much rather you just do it and that be your introduction into disability. So then you're actually a little bit more open to learning. But it's always a weird line, because there are so many people that don't take that approach, and rightly or wrongly, it's always a bit of a weird, yeah.
It is
I
strange. And I think it's really interesting, like being online and being surrounded by disabled people, and then being like in a real life situation can be quite stark and quite weird. Like when I moved in with my second year flatmates at uni, they saw my social media bios, activist, writer, speaker, like kind of
Yep. Yeah,
vibes.
yeah.
And they were like, they admitted to me months down the line that they were really scared to speak to me. And it took a few weeks for them to realize that I would answer pretty much anything, or I'd tell them why I wouldn't answer
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And that I was like super open and like really didn't see anything as inherently problematic, and always kind of wanted to have those conversations. And I think it's a real difficulty where people are so scared to ask, and there are times that it's very heavily inappropriate to ask
Uh,
things. Like, don't get me wrong, I hate when strangers are shouting at me on the street. Like, that's completely inappropriate and wrong. But if you live with me and you're just saying, Charlie, like, I had this question,
yeah.
can I
Yeah.
ask you a question? Cool, fine, go for it. Like, I might not say yes, but do it.
Yeah,
Like,
the weirdest hesitation I always get, and this is really like beige and really vanilla, but it's always like, yes, Dave, I'm in a wheelchair. You can say it. It's not a dirty word. It's absolutely
mm,
fine. It's a very clear observation. You're
I
absolutely fine.
ha- I had one of those recently where someone was saying, "Oh, this scholarship, they really like people like you," and I was like, "You can say disabled. It's okay." It's all
Yeah,
right.
it's not a dirty word. It's fine.
So funny.
It's great, but then it creates that like environment of people. I think that's my biggest fear is that have we created an environment where because there are so
Mm,
many different terms and so many different ways that people approach it, do we scare people off because they're just so overloaded by what they perceive all the information to be that they're like, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot barge pole.
I think I was a lot harsher about it when I was younger, because I didn't really understand where that came from and like how little knowledge there was in the real world with like big quotation marks kind of thing, but in because the online world is real, right? But like, when you are in a community of people who do all come from the same language and this, and often like not always the same positions, like we have many heavy debates, but like you kind of there's a base knowledge there that doesn't exist in the
Yeah,
real world.
yeah,
Like it
agreed.
doesn't exist amongst the average person, and it took me a really long time to straddle between those worlds, I think, and like understanding like what is acceptable and what isn't from someone who doesn't have that knowledge. Like at what points are they just being rude and disrespectful or not wanting to hear from you, and at what points are they just uneducated and just need a moment to kind of catch up. And I think it's taken me a long time, and I don't necessarily think I always get that right now, to be honest.
I mean, you can't. You're human, and everyone misjudges situations. I think for me, I always judge it on what's the tonality. You can always tell whether a question's coming from a general point of view, or you're being goaded into a reaction, or something like that, or it has an element of malice behind it. So I would always approach like, bear in mind, I've done content around intimacy. I've done anything and everything you could basically ask me, and I'd go, yeah, I'll answer it because fuck it, why not? Um, but then the tonality of that is very different. Of someone who comes up to me in a bar and generally goes, I bet you get this all the time, but how does it work when it comes to dating and everything else?
Mm.
The tonality of that rather than, so wait, you have a girlfriend. Wait, what? How does that work?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very different, you can, as I said, that's where I judge the situation because you can always see where the intent's coming from, so then I can make the decision on that. But it's a very, like you said, it's a very weird line to try and straddle because it's that whole thing. We both work in the space of like everyone has a base level of knowledge, and obviously, like you said, there's very different points of view, but there's almost that like this is the line and this is the base level of knowledge, whereas that doesn't really exist all the time out in the outside world.
No, and especially like I've done so much work now with companies or with parents of autistic people or like wherever I go, and there's always a slightly different knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think things like the inclusion of parents in the autistic community, for example, I used to be really heavily militant about some of these things that like they should never be included, and that's like not something that we should do. And I understand so much more now about like, yeah, there are some really horrible people who will use that position to say some really awful things and be anti-vax or whatever it is. But also there's lots of autistic people who the only way to include them is through their parent carers who are just genuinely looking for support. So there are so many things that I used to be so strict on and believed that I was in the right in ways that now I see in such a nuanced way. And I was a teenager, so I try not to be too hard on myself about it. But equally, I think that there's a lot of situations online that don't allow for nuance, and I'm a big nuance lover. Like I will see the nuance in everything. And I think sometimes I look at things online and I kind of go, that just needs a bit of a dose of somebody going, there's this, but there's also this, and
Yeah,
they're both
yeah,
right and wrong in these ways.
yeah.
And maybe we should just take some time. And but I think like a 1 minute, a 3 minute, even like TikTok is never gonna cover all the nuance. A 10 slide graphic's never gonna cover all the nuance. So it just doesn't give us that room, I don't think.
And it's that allow I bring up so many episodes of allowing people to make mistakes, and as you say, allowing
Mm,
that space for nuance and trying to see stuff from a different perspective. Because I think as well, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes particularly the online community can be a little bit shouty, and that's not disability specific. That's across the board. I mean,
mm.
look at everything going on in the world, but yeah, there are a lot of people with very strong opinions, and you sit there going, it's not that deep. Or also, have you thought about it from this point of view?
Yeah, no, 100%. I so often just have to scroll by because I just know that it's not gonna go my
No,
way.
yeah, no, I hear that so well. Changing subject a little bit, I want to dive into your writing journey and how that started. Whenever I get writers on, I'm always intrigued by it. Partly also being dyslexic, I'm like, Jesus, sod doing that because my brain couldn't cope. I know there are disabled writers out, dyslexic writers out there, but no, no, thank you. So I wanted to dive into sort of the journey of writing, where the idea came from for All Tangled Up in autism and chronic illness, and also what it was like writing it, and then also what it's like now that it's here in the world, and what that journey's been like as well.
Um, yeah, I guess so. I really felt like there wasn't a book on the market on this topic, and I was right. It is the first book on the market on the topic, and I think every time I had been handed a leaflet like for a condition, just didn't make sense from my experience of it. And as I started to learn about how these things co-occur and how they clash and combine and all the different ways that they impact each other, I was really kind of going, this is it's not a unique experience in terms of how many people experience it because it's really common. Um, but it is a unique experience in how the body and the brain experiences the world. And I was just like, somebody's got to do it. And so I kind of went, well, like, why not me? And so I signed my deal at 21, made a lot of errors in that process. It's something that I'd really like to write about at some point, when I feel like that's okay. But yeah, signed my deal at 21, wrote the book from 21 to 22, and then it came out at the end of 23. So I found it a really liberating but difficult process, I think is the only way to kind of say it, because I really loved a lot of what I was saying, researching. I interviewed about 20 other autistic chronically ill people for it. So there's around 20 other people in the book. It's not a memoir at all. My experiences are in there, of course, like the framework is kind of around that, but it's really not about me. And it took so long and so much accountability because with my ADHD, I think had I not had somebody going, Charlie, like this book does have to be written, every month, I met with my editor. And, the 2 days before I met with my editor, I'd suddenly go, oh, I need to write some of the book. And I'd suddenly like write like 2,000 words
The
in the
focus.
span of,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. But I think, but I loved it. Like I loved it and hated it in such equal measure. And I did it because so I took a year out of uni in the middle of my degree, and I don't think it would have happened had that not happened to me. I ended up taking that year out because I had some physical health going on. I was in mental health crisis. It just all went wrong. This is mid-pandemic as well,
Yep.
so
That'll do it.
it kind of everything just exploded around me. And so the first like 9 months that I wrote the book, I was off uni, and I think it really was an anchor for me of having something else to do and be, and not just be kind of going backwards and forwards from therapy to physio to doctor's appointments to medication to all of these things. So it was a real anchor for me in that time. I went back to uni that October and wrote like the last third of the book while also studying. Terrible. That was not fun.
Imagine.
that was not fun. But I think it was a real anchor for me. And I think ADHD is so interesting for me because I'd only discovered it that year or the year before. Um, I kind of think that everyone, what am I trying to say? I think a lot of people with ADHD will kind of go, I could never write a book. And actually, because they say like I can't focus or whatever, and I think that that's true for a lot of us, but also if you put in the supports, like it's not impossible. Like if it's something you want to do, you can do it. There's so many different ways to do it as well. Like it doesn't have to be 60,000 words of just research or just writing. Like it could be in verse, it could be in list format, it could be fiction, like it can be all of these different things. So I think if it's something you want to do and you find a format that works for you with the right supports around you, like go for it. It's cool, do it. um so yeah, it was a long process. I didn't know how long publishing was. I wrote it for just over a year. I wrote it in 11 months, and then it was another, and then how long was, no, I wrote it in 13 months, and then it was another 11 before it came out. So it was like 11 months worth of editing, going backwards and forwards to different editors, the book cover, things like I didn't actually have an index in the end, but like that all happens during that process. um
Was there ever a point where you like, look, this has been great, but I'm now losing the will with it?
I think I did get to a point where I just wanted it out of my hands. But I think that's what happens with a lot of long projects. When I wrote my dissertation, I was exactly the same. By the end, I was like, I can't read this again. I can't, like, I don't know what it says anymore. Like, I think you just get like that with something that long term. And I definitely think there were times where I was kind of just like, why did I sign up for this? Like,
I hear that.
I
Yeah,
did this to myself. I
yeah.
volunteered.
I think as well.
um,
It's that it's a big commitment. It's a big commitment. And I know you briefly touched on like the level of focus, but the level of focus to constantly come back to it,
mm,
even as someone without ADHD, that in itself is such a challenge on its own. Because you, no matter who you are, you've got shit going on at home. Things are going wrong. Things are going right. Everything's up in the air, and you're like, I've got to commit to. I've committed to this, so I've got to follow through.
yeah, I think in a way, I really loved that because so for non-fiction, you don't have to write the book before you get a book deal, but you do have to do like a chapter summary proposal kind of vibe. And so I already had the structure. I just had to force myself to write it. And there were definitely chapters towards the end that I left to the end and did not care for particularly. Like I was just like, I'm done now. I've done the ones that I was really super interested in. Like you do get to that point. But I think equally, like I've read some great books where, it's essays or verse or something where it's like something like Untamed, is a great book where it's all quite bite-sized short pieces all like put together. So I think I'd really love to explore other formats. I think the way I managed it was with mine, it's got my story, it's got interviews, it's got lists, it's got little graphics here and there that I made myself in Canva, and then they just put them in the book. I thought they were going to make
I love
them
that.
look better, but apparently not. Um, so mine's got quite a little variety of things, and I kind of just chipped away at it, and I kind of loved that in a way. But I do think for fiction, for example, you have to write the book before you get a book deal. And I'd love to go into fiction, but without that accountability and the support, I just don't know if I'll ever make it. Because I do think that's harder when there isn't somebody on the other end going, "Where's the book?"
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I'd imagine I would be the exact same thing. I'm intrigued though. I've never actually asked. I've had other people that have written books. How do you go about like trying to find a book deal or working with publishers? How does that journey even work?
So for me, it looks slightly non-traditional, and I think I would do it differently if I had my time again. So for me, I had been kind of not scouted, but I'd had some discussion with who became my editor in the end previously, like a year and a half before. And they'd kind of said, if you have any ideas, like let us know. And I kind of went, I'm really busy and I don't really have any ideas. And then a year and a half later, I just kind of emailed and went, I kind of have an idea now. I don't know if you remember me, but like, what's the deal? Like, how does this happen? And then went through the whole process, and it kind of goes, you do the proposal and your editor goes to try and sell it to like the sales team and the marketing, and they all kind of go, yes, that's probably profitable, let's do it. But the real thing that I will forever wish I did and will not write another book without is an agent. Because an agent has like your best interests at heart, and they're really there to kind of go through the contract and understand like what that means and what that means for you as an author, and make sure there's no exploitation and all of those things. And I really wish I'd had that backup, to make sure that I really got the best out of the situation. So yeah, I think most people it'll be agent, and then that goes out on submission to all the publishers, and then the publishers kind of come back and go, okay, we'd like to buy it, and then you either choose one, or sometimes it goes to auction. Different ways happen.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Whereas for me, it just went to one publisher, and they went, yes, we'll buy it, and that was kind of that.
Mad. I didn't even think that that was in part of the process. The idea that your
Mm.
idea goes to auction and be like, right, who wants it?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I think it's so like I don't really know quite how auctioning specifically works, but it is a bit wild that sometimes you can have like six publishers being like, we really want it. We're gonna put thousands into it. Like
The
I
worst
can
thing is,
only
all I've got
dream.
going through my head is like, the old school, like, flog it guy with the hammer. That's all I've got in my head
That's
at the moment.
that's whenever somebody like I read an article that's like this book went to auction, I really like to imagine all the publishers like sat round a little guy with a gavel, but I think unfortunately it's just over email.
Ah,
So
that's not as exciting.
no, not at all.
Changing subject again, I wanted to dive into, obviously it's a big topic within the cyber community, and you've written an article on the big changes that are coming to PIP, and I just wanted you to talk on sort of your opinion on it and everything that's going on, because as well, I find it really hard when I get asked about it, because I feel like I haven't been as affected as others in the scenario, because it's very much like having a physical condition that doesn't change. It's very much like
Mm.
I'm right there with you, and I'm like, yeah, I completely agree, but I can't really directly speak on it. So I wanted to get your views on it.
Yeah, I think it's been a really hard couple of weeks to be in the space, and I've really had to learn when to take some moments away from it, because I kind of ended up the first couple of weeks really burning myself out on it. But I think it's been I think that some of the proposals won't make it through, because I think they're just too harsh, and I don't think they'll make it through based on things like the human rights aspect. Because everything that kind of goes through Parliament like this has to have an impact assessment. They have to look at whether it meets the Human Rights Act, which is one of my specialties. And I think there are things in there that may not make it. But I think regardless of how much makes it, the feelings that it brings up and the rhetoric it brings into society and the way people talk and think about disabled people is going to damage us regardless. They could take away the proposals tomorrow in terms of the money, and we would still be so damaged from what they've done here. So I think that's one part of it for me is it's not it is absolutely about the money and about poverty and about putting disabled people in such a horrible position. But there is also an element of the rhetoric and how people are being talked about and treated and understood. So I almost see those as very intertwining but slightly separate kind of aspects of this issue. I think it's so hard to constantly see people genuinely believe that we're scrounging, that we're faking, that we're receiving thousands and thousands of pounds. Top rate PIP is like not even, I think it's just over £750, and the extra cost of being disabled is over 1,000 a month. So it doesn't even meet the extra costs, let alone if you're using it because you can't have a supplementary income. So the beliefs that people have are so directly tied to how the government has spoken about us. Like, even in that very first announcement that they did just within Parliament. So, a lot of people, I don't think, really necessarily watched it in Parliament. They kind of saw it through speeches and work done later in the media and stuff. But that very first um, speech announcement that they did was so packed full of really horrible statements about disabled people, and there's this genuinely belief that we just don't want to work, and there's just so much to be said for it. I think there's just like, it's like, where do you begin to push back, because there's just so much of it, and so much of it is so heavily inaccurate, and so much of it is so different for each disabled person, that it's I think it's like a losing battle, because it means that we just can never push back on all of it, because we'd never do anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they bank on. Like, I really think that that's what they want. And we've ended up, I think that just like they've really tried to pit disabled people against the working class, as if disabled people aren't often the working
Yeah.
class. So many people are like, well, why am I working a 40-hour week when I can't afford a food shop, and you're getting all this money from the government, not understanding that that's just not the reality, and not accurate, and not disabled people's fault. But that's what they're being fed by the media and the government. So of course that's what they're going to believe, like I don't blame that for
Yeah.
being.
I think as well, the other large part of this, particularly when we're talking about the whole work aspect of it, is taking disability out of the equation. It the current recruitment and employment market is, whoa, it is a beast on its own. It's so I can understand even taking the disability out of the equation. There are so many pressures on jobs and people being made redundant and everything that revolves around that, that it's almost like this is just adding fuel to the fire of like, it's another thing that's a problem that we need to fix and we're the problem. And that's the really tricky thing with it, because so many, like you say, so many disabled people want to work. There's the huge part of it where in, inclusion within work placements is getting better, but it still isn't great. But then you caveat that with everything that's going on in the job market, and it's just a perfect shitstorm. It's just not the one.
No, 100%. And I think we've all said it, like, what jobs? Get Britain working in what jobs? Like, genuinely, where do you want these disabled people to work? Whether they can or not, because there are lots of disabled people who will never work, right? You could do everything under the sun for inclusion and equality, and there are still disabled people that will never work. And that should be seen as okay. That doesn't mean that they're useless or a waste of money, or that society shouldn't support them. That subsection of people should be supported. And I think it's an interesting one, because I think a lot of us have been saying, like, PIP is not an out of work benefit, and it's not. But I think when we say that, we also have to caveat that doesn't mean that those who don't work shouldn't also be supported. Like, I think we have to really heavily make sure that that is understood. I think it's important to talk about it not being an out of work benefit, because people do need to understand the additional costs of being disabled, and they do need to understand, you know, why it exists, and why the government are trying to use the rhetoric that they are. And acting as if it is a work benefit also really contributes to that issue of the enemy of the working class kind of thing. So I think it is important to say it's not an out of work benefit, but also not saying that in a way that leaves disabled people who can't work behind.
Yeah, completely,
If that makes
completely,
sense.
completely agree. And I think as well, the other part of it is I've now lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens. is this because one of the things that I often bring up on this pod is one of my biggest concerns at the moment as a remote worker currently is this big shift that we're seeing of basically, I feel like taking a huge step backwards with now pushing everyone into the offices. Now,
Mm.
I've openly said several times, I am of the belief of it shouldn't even be like, oh, we're a remote company, we're a non-remote company. It should just be, Charlie, what works best for you? Okay, let's do that. As long as the work gets done, who gives a shit? That's always going to be my approach, and I do have a huge concern with the amount of companies now saying no, everyone's got to be in the office, because then that removes, while there can be special consideration and reasonable adjustments for those with disabilities, it almost automatically gives them an out and closes down that conversation. Where if that option's there for everyone, one, it unmarginalizes us to a very minimal extent, but it does. But then also, it's just having that open communication with it. And don't get me wrong, I know there's people out there that are going, but getting people back in the offices helps the economy, because then people go to the shops and do this and do that. 100% yes. But, like, we've lasted this long, guys.
Also, like, people who work from home still go out to the shops, but they just do so on their lunch break or before work, like, because they
Yeah.
can, because
Yep.
they've got so much more space. And I think that for me is the real crux of it, is we should have learned so much from the pandemic. We like I wrote an article or like a blog post at the time. I think I was only like 20. I think it was for like a youth movement kind of vibe. And I wrote a bit about understanding how work has changed and theatre and cinema from home and all of these brilliant, brilliant things that really did unmarginalize us in lots of ways that we've just lost completely. You know, everyone just went, it's time to go back to the office. And, you know, office working doesn't work for so many people for so many reasons. And it's less productive. Like, there's so many studies about how much time is genuinely wasted in offices compared to at home. And don't get me wrong, like, I freelance and sometimes I get to go to in-person working for like certain things. And I do love aspects of it. Like, I do love getting to be around people and getting to have a little drink and a chat that you wouldn't have when you just click on and off to Zoom calls. Like, there are real benefits, but like, also it doesn't work for everyone. Disabled people, people with caring responsibilities, you know, there's so many other groups that really benefit from that flexibility. And I think I don't understand it. And I think, again, it's one of these things that's very peddled by media and government and the big people. I talk a lot about Alan Sugar. He talks a lot about not working from home. He's a big advocate for going back to the office. But every time I see him do a TV appearance, he's always at home in his office.
Valid point.
So,
Valid point. I mean, the other thing as well is just, I'm gonna just outwardly say it because it's my podcast and I can. I just think it's all about flipping people who want power and bums on seats and don't want to change the way they think. I can't find a way where, admittedly, there are obviously the rock battle is going to be, we can't do every job from home. Agreed. Yeah, I agree with that. And there are exceptions, but they're not. That's what I'm saying. No, get rid of offices. Everyone work from home. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is it's just that conversation of what works better for the one individual, rather.
absolutely.
And like, as we've said, studies have all shown if an employee's happier, they're going to work harder. And there's like, and that's not
Yeah.
new. That's not new news.
And
I,
it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Like, we know from so many studies that the 4-day working week is more productive. But companies here will not do it because they can't fathom how that would work. Even though all the studies say it, they
yeah,
can't
yeah,
understand it, so they just won't do it. Instead of going, so many studies say that, why don't we just try and see what
yeah.
happens?
One of my favorite things, my partner pointed out to me today. So, sent me Instagram post about the way Norway manages their working life versus
Yeah,
family life, and it's one of the things I've never understood about the UK and as well the Americas included in with this, and also I think a load of other countries do as well, where our work life doesn't match the education system. So we'll have parents that finish work at 5, yet their kids finish school at 3, and then there's this like random 2-hour period where parents are scrambling trying to find care, and I'm like, what? Just an idea. Why don't we match these two up so that then everything becomes a little bit easier?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same thing with the holidays. Like I had someone I'm working with is from Denmark, and I didn't get a reply from them for a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh, I wonder where they are. Denmark just had a 2-week holiday at Easter, like everyone,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was like, wow.
Well, it's
Like,
like, isn't it? I can't say directly because I've only seen it through like weird TikToks. But I swear, like France has a rule where they don't work in August.
yeah, I don't know. But like I do a lot of work in certain sectors where nothing happens in August, but officially everyone is still at work. It's just
Okay.
that no big meetings and stuff happen.
Yeah,
And I'm always like, I think it would be more productive all round and everyone be happier if we just didn't. Like if we
yeah,
just also I mean childcare, let's not even go there. I mean like that wipes out so many people's entire earnings.
yeah, 100%. I mean, to the point where I'm 26, and me and Gina have said, like, don't know, in the current scenario where we're in with the education system and everything, I'm not sure. I am definitely on the fence.
So valid.
And then coming more into talking a bit more about your autism and your experience with autism. One of the big things I really wanted to get your opinion on is this new surgence of the phrase autistic coded. And it's being
Mm.
used in several different facets, whether that's characters in films or just describing an individual. There's always been a bit of me that's like, yeah, I really don't like this because it's kind of, yeah, it makes it feel like it's almost it's trendy. And I'm like, that's not what this is all about. What are we doing?
Yeah. So I wrote an article a while back about Wednesday, about this kind of neurodivergent coding and whether that's good or bad. And I think it's a really, again, very nuanced kind of thing. I love when we get to kind of sit and go, actually, that character is so like me. Unintendedly, like they're just really like me and I really relate. And I think that, they've got these 5 different traits and that's like very autistic coded. And we, especially looking back at old media, like I really love that we have that ability and flexibility to kind of say, this looks like me in a way that most traditional media doesn't. What I don't like is when producers and writers rely on it as a way to not provide actual representation. I think it's a great thing for the community, but I really struggle when companies are using it as a kind of get out of jail free, because they can kind of know that we'll still consume that media even if they never label it so as to not alienate anyone. Because I think their theory is if they have characters that other people who are not neurodivergent like really relate to them, and then they're suddenly like, this character's getting diagnosed, they're going to alienate that other audience, which I just think is rubbish. And I think also, yeah, it really means that they don't have to have like a specific audience, like they can still be for everyone. And they also have a bit of a get out of jail free in that if they mess something up around it, they haven't labeled it. So
Yay.
it's not actually bad, or like they haven't done anything wrong because they never said it was that in the first place. I hate that. So I think for me it's like, it's why is it being done? What does it look like? And how are we doing it? Like for characters, I think it's a really important thing for us as a community to have that ability to talk about it. And I think things like, so I wrote a Substack about Grey's Anatomy a while back about neurodivergence in that, because there's some canon rep in that is arguably quite ineffective and not great. And then there's other characters in that who are never labeled but are so clearly, like Christina Yang is like the clearest autistic character you've ever seen in your life, but she's not labeled that way. And so I think it's, yeah, for me it's like, what does it look like? Why? When is it from? And is it just that directors and writers are just not wanting to label it because they don't want to put a like stick their limbs out, I guess.
Then again, I do wonder if there's an element of like almost because we've complained about it before, that whole by putting a label on it, it's almost it's like, oh, it's a what's the word? I can't think. But it's like tokenism of, oh well, we've done it now and we've officially said it. We have a disabled person in this show, and I think that's where I think there's a bit of a grey line, because I think where maybe they're trying to get to is this whole thing of, then it feels more not osmosis, but it's more fluid, it's more, or like we're not directly saying it, but it's there and it's more like in the background. Because one thing I always say is like, why is the wheelchair guy, it's always like this big dramatic thing of like, oh, he's found love, this has happened, blah blah. Why has it got to be this big thing? Like, why can't it just be, oh yeah, Charlie's a character, he's in a wheelchair, this thing happened to him, but it could have happened to anyone, but it just happens it happened to the guy in the wheelchair. Why isn't it that? So I think it's one of those. Obviously, that's me relating it to my lived experience, and I do wonder whether it's that. But I think as an outsider looking in, I more have issues with people using it as terminology outside of
Mm.
TV and everything else, because I'm like, it's not a like, yeah, it feels like it's almost turning into a trend thing of like people have just jumped on it because it's a new terminology, and I'm like, no, like it's actually got like stuff behind it that you need to
Yeah.
understand before you just start lashing that term around.
Yeah, I really disagree when people do it to celebrities, for example. When it's real people, that's kind of for me a bit of a hard line. Um, because we see so little of them. Like we actually know so little about people that it's just not, yeah, it's just not okay.
The other thing as well is that at any point it's their story to share. If they
Yeah,
are and they suddenly come out and go, yeah, by the way, I'm autistic, cool. But if they choose not to,
yeah, good for
also
you,
cool.
but
Like, it's it's not for anyone else to make the judgment. And I think there's that horrible assumption with the celebrities of like, they've just got to let us in everywhere, and like
yeah, yeah.
it's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
very tricky line.
influencers are exactly the same as well, I think, in that sense.
Well, definitely, like definitely, it's that whole thing of like, oh, but you've got to show us this guy. Just that at the end of the day, finding that line as a creator, I mean, I've not been in the situation where I've sort of had to, because I've always kind of put that in place anyway. But finding that line as a creator can be really difficult, because you want to connect with your audience, but then also close the door. Like several times I've sat there and gone, why can't I be good at something that isn't front facing? And I have to be all happy, clappy, and jumping around, but then it's just finding that balance. And I think, yeah, as you say, it's that allowing people to share what they want to share, and not diving in too deep. And also, it's again understanding nuance. And I think as well, my thing is always, we've got to be more empathetic, guys. Like, everyone needs to just chill out, just chill, and try and take a
Yeah,
step back and understand from a different perspective. Like, that's always been my approach. If I don't understand something, I'll tend to kind of take a step back and go, I'm an idiot. I want to understand this. Can you explain to me as if I'm an idiot, and then I can gain an understanding of it? It's so, we put so much pressure on today's society, and I just think, particularly, I was related to, and I'm gonna throw shade on my own people here, because I am a Southerner also. It's the same thing about us Southerners. We've always got somewhere to be. We've got no patience with each other, and it's another example I often use of like, we just need to be more chill. Everyone just needs to just take a chill pill. And also, I say empathy is a massive thing, but that's me getting on my big
my
horse, and
horse.
yeah,
No, no. I think, yeah, and I think like for me, I've really struggled with the line between authenticity and privacy. Like, at what point when I'm like having a really hard time, do I have to go, actually, guys, this is like things are really bad, in order to be authentic, compared to also being able to go, I don't want to tell you. I don't want like 9,000 people to know that I'm not all right. Like, I find it really hard.
it is really hard. And as well, it's like the whole thing of no one can fully understand what's going through someone's head. And I think when we talk about mental health for creators and for everyone, it's kind of everyone processes things in a different way. Like I know if I'm in a bad headspace, creativity goes out the fucking window.
Yeah, yeah, that
Bye
too.
bye. No, no.
Absolutely.
I'm like, I couldn't even string together a sentence, let alone put together a video.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is you can often put so much pressure on yourself of like, I've got to do this, got to do this. I've promised I would do this. And it's okay to just go, no, this isn't working and I need to stop. Because your body will, and at any point with stress as well, your body will tell you. Your body will just go, yeah, we're not doing this. And if you don't stop, I will kick you and you will stop.
No, absolutely. Especially as like a chronically ill person where there is less energy to be had anyway, and things like bad sleep, bad mental health do impact that. So yeah, it's a real issue.
I can't even imagine managing it as someone with chronic illness because it just adds
Yeah.
another fluid layer, and you're just like, guys, give me a break, give me give me a
Yeah.
break.
God
Um,
forbid you get a normal cold, like that's it then.
oh no, no. Also, I wanted to ask as well. Talking of content creation, you've really lent towards more creating educational resources recently with your content, and I just wondered what that transition's been like because it can often feel like you've always got to come. Well, I imagine it's often like you've got to come up with this. It's I would worry that I'd run out of ideas. I'm just going to say that if I was doing the same thing and focusing around educational, I would worry, how can I keep framing this in a way that's going to be engaging? And I just wonder what the process has been like during that transition.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't necessarily see it as like my focus is this thing. I just kind of go through phases where I'm more interested in one thing than another. So for me, a lot of my interest is in systems, it's in systemic issues, it's in the psychiatric system, it's in capitalism as well, specifically. My undergrad dis was on autism under capitalism. So a lot of my stuff tends to come back to there. So recently, like I've been talking about abolition and about the psychiatric system and about like healthcare and like all of those things, but it all comes back down to like the same roots, like the same beliefs about all of that. So whenever I'm making something, even like I often think I'm a bit all over the place, but then when I look at it, actually, the reality is that it's not that. It's actually just that it's rooted in the same things, and I'm just taking a different angle. And I think also as somebody who reads a lot, like I'll be reading a book and then I'm like, must talk about this thing. So yeah, I said earlier about not knowing whether I make content for non-disabled people or for other disabled people, and I've kind of had to let go of deciding and kind of had to go, actually, how can I make content that is relevant to everyone? And actually, what learning can we all do from each other? Rather than it being about me being an educator to other people, like how can you learn from me and I'll learn from you? And I think that's my big thing.
I think again, you've hit the nail on the head of it. It's that nuance. Your key skill very much clearly comes through of understanding the nuance and kind of not taking it to one way or the other and sort of diving into those little details. I 100% agree, and I think it's really nice to see someone else as well that's gone through like very much phases of their creation journey because I've often felt like, similar to you. I'm like, Jesus Christ, am I just all over the shop? Like, have I just tell you what, I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna stop doing it. That has crossed my mind before. I'm like,
Yeah.
yep, nope, not gonna do this anymore.
Think about archiving and restarting all the time. And then I'm like, but I don't need to do that in order to just say a slightly different thing. Yeah, and I think I'm always going to be playing about with different styles, different graphics, different kinds of video because that's what I like to do. Like I'm not, and also like most of my money is not in content creation, it's elsewhere. So, and as much as I would like to shift that, I also am never going to be a person that makes content on the basis that I might then make some money. So, I say things quite often that I know are not very friendly to like a brand audience, but I'm going to say them anyway because they're true to me and my values, and I can't imagine not doing that. And yeah, like absolutely no shade to anyone who is like, I'm not going to talk about politics. Like you do you. But for me, that's never gonna work and never be kind of aligned. So
I
yeah,
think controversial opinion before we get on to the last question. My thing is with politics, and I've said it on it before. All of them are just as bad as each other. None of them actually follow through with what they're going to say anyway. So why does it
yeah.
like?
Well, yeah, and I also think like politics is in everything, right? Like reading, for example, is inherently political. Like being able to read anything that your books contain, like having access to books, all of that is political. So everything is. So whatever your niche is, you are still talking about
Yeah,
politics.
yeah,
Like you are still political. And I think for me, I will always be on the side of I want creators to use their influence and to use their lived experience and to really lean into that. And I think, if we all did that, then brands would kind of have to say, okay, actually, we don't mind some political content on people's pages because it would be on everyone's pages. But I also understand that for some people, they've got to earn a living, and that's where we're at right
yeah.
now. So here we are.
I think it's hard as well. It's again that that nuance of allowing people to have different opinions. Like I think that's an art we've lost of very much like I have a different opinion of you, but that doesn't mean that I think you're an asshole or we land on different sides of this. That's absolutely fine. And I've never understood the whole you have to all be in the same camp of like I like that whole thing of someone goes and says something and I'm like I don't see that the same way, and here's why. And then we have the open communication to be like, this is why, and understanding their perspective. Because a lot of the time, it's a conversation that you wouldn't normally have because it's like automatically it feels like there's like a friction, and we're like, oh, one of us has got to catch each other out. And I think that's another thing I'd like to see more of, just in the wider community in general, of us just going, we're allowed to see things different ways, and that's okay. Like,
Yeah. Like I think for me, there are always going to be hard lines. Like there are going to be
whatever.
things that I say, that's not all right. But there are lots of things that I used to have really hard line opinions on that I don't anymore. That are like, things like homophobia, transphobia, fascism, obviously hard lines. But I used to have such hard lines about my own opinions that weren't necessarily fact. That I was just so but I just believed that that was the only way. It's taken me a long time to kind of move around in some of that, I think.
Oh, definitely. Like as you say, there's definite things where you go, no, this needs to stay like this, or this needs to not happen. I think that's the thing of too many people get wrapped up in oh everything is like that when actually no, there are definitely some areas where you're like yeah you can't do that, but you can openly discuss this and all. So I think this is where my belief comes in of like the tonality plays a huge part of it. If something said that's slightly prickly, but you can see it's sent from a genuine place of like either uneducatedness or genuine curiosity, then that's open to the communication channel. But yeah, it's a very tricky thing. And even saying it now, I'm like, I'm probably not articulating this very well. But I think yeah, it's a really tricky one.
Yeah, it's hard. It is hard. And I think we're all living for the first time, right? Like, I think it's something that I forget a lot is that we are all living for the first time. We can only do as much as we can do and learn as we go. Like, yeah, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself in a way that I don't deserve.
It's again allowing others and allowing yourself to make mistakes. And I say that as a fucking perfectionist. That's like, no, I fucked up. Like
It's
yeah,
the end of the world.
yeah. So it's just we all need to be kinder to each other and ourselves. I think that's where I've ended up. But lastly, before we finish off, I just wanted to ask you the last question that I ask every guest, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
Right, I'm gonna hop on my soapbox about the fact that I really hate the fact that every shop now has a reward card.
Well, yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah,
I talk about
yeah,
this all the time.
yeah.
Like, why is everybody data farming and why must I have a card in order to get like 50p off? Like, I am sick of it. Like, my wallet is so
Yeah.
massive. Like, why?
Yeah,
Like, I
no,
can't.
I hear it. I hear it.
Oh,
Like, it's also like, some of the loyalty schemes, I'm like, is this even worth it? Like, one of my big ones at the moment, I'm just gonna outright say it. Asda's is horseshit. Like, what the fuck is that?
I mean, yeah, I like some of them. I'm just like, I don't want to give you my data and then get all the notifications and the letters and all of this stuff for the sake of what? And some of them, it's like, what? Like, I just can't stand it. I just
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that, and some of them, it's more annoying when the discounts are really extreme, I feel, than when they're like tiny. Because why is something £15 for one person and
Oh,
£6 for another person?
yeah, yeah.
I can't, I actually can't stand it. Like, I just think I'm at a point where I'm not all right with it anymore. Like, I've got like 15 of the things for every supermarket going and every shop go. I can't do it anymore.
Controversial opinion. I actually think so I have airtime rewards.
That's good.
I really like that system of like you just
That's excellent.
link it to your card and then that's that. And I know everyone's gonna go, oh, but that's sensitive data, 100%. But then also for just the simplicity part of it, just it's there. I've signed up for it. Whenever I use this card for this thing, it will just work, and it's
Yeah,
great.
airtime rewards are great. I think they're brilliant. But yeah, oh,
Yeah. So airtime rules. If you're listening, I'm more than happy to work with you.
yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, that's like, and I like that because it just builds quietly in the background because you
Yes.
don't even
Yeah.
know that you're doing it. Because that's the other thing is we end up buying so much stuff for the sake of the reward. It's it's not a deal if you weren't going to buy it in the
Yeah.
first place.
It's the free delivery trap. That's the big one.
You
But
know? Oh,
then again, I fall into that all the time because I'm like, why would I give you the money when I could just get another thing?
yeah.
Like,
But then
yeah,
the consumerism and there's just so many elements to it, and I'm sick of it. I don't want to engage in capitalism anymore. I'm
I
done.
hate you. I hate you. But thank you so much for coming on, Charlie. Obviously, if you do want
Thank
to get
you.
in touch with Charlie, I will link all of their details below for you. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer any questions or anything like that. But thank you so much for coming on again.
No, thank you for having me.